Whether you're a chestnut farmer, a food lover, or simply curious about this versatile nut, branching out with United Chestnuts is your guide to a thriving chestnut community. So join us as we explore the many branches of the chestnut tree, uncover the untold stories, and branching out together towards a sustainable future.
Thank you for joining in another episode of the Chestnut Industry Podcast, Branching Out. One of the things that my husband, Brad, and I love the most about being part of the chestnut community are the friends that we've made and the common mission that we're all on, but also the diversity of interests and expertise of these friends. Think about it. Some people are interested in the chestnut tree and chestnuts because they're landowners. They want to increase the value of their property. They might be supporting wildlife. Some are hunters who know that these animals love chestnuts. Others are interested in developing better farming practices or agroforestry. Some are supporting climate change. Others still are learning how to prepare and cook chestnuts and incorporate them into our restaurants and our everyday diet. I'm interested in helping to raise the awareness level by sales and marketing of the chestnut to the American consumer. Some that we've had quite a few guests on the podcast are advancing the chestnut tree itself through research and testing. Some are interested in the nutritional benefits of the chestnut, which are many. And that brings me to today's guest, which is Landon Evans. My husband, Brad, met Ken Evans and his son, Landon, at a recent Chestnut Growers of America conference. And then I learned about Landon's expertise and education in nutrition in general, but specific to the chestnuts. So this is a very, very interesting discussion if you like nutrition, which I do, and that the role that the chestnut plays, but even the greater role that it can play as we increase the product in America. So thanks again for tuning in and being part of the chestnut community. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Landon, thank you so much for joining the Branching Out podcast. Our families met at the Chestnut Growers of America conference, I think 2 years ago, although I wasn't there, but my husband, Brad, met you and your dad, Ken. And so that's how we met. And I did not realize that you had such a vast amount of education around nutrition and exercise and all that. So really appreciate you joining today and sharing some thoughts on that, kind of along those lines.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and it was such a blessing meeting Brad at the last conference, and my dad and Brad and me, we just kind of hit it off, and it was great, and I'm so glad to get to know y'all, and hopefully we can, like I said, continue to meet up and just continue to grow in the chestnut community.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. So. All right, you guys are based in East Texas, and you have East Texas chestnuts, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So we're in East Texas. We're around Russ County area, and so that's where our home is. That's where we grew up. Me and my younger brother, and so it's me and my dad and my younger brother, and we have it's about a 12.5 acre chestnut farm. And we grow Dunstan and some Chinese variety chestnuts.
Fantastic. And what is it like working with your dad and your brother?
Well, it's really been spearheaded by my dad, this whole chestnut. He really became passionate about it at an early age. He has always enjoyed the outdoors, and me and my little brother have as well. We grew up in rural area out in the country, and it was great, just running out in the woods in the summer times. But my dad remembers being a kid and eating chinkapins, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but in the South, there's there was a lot of chinky pins, and here in Texas, the blight, actually the chestnut blight, kind of destroyed a lot of the chinky pins, and so they're still out there, just few and far between, and most of them don't grow up very tall before that blight kills them again. And so that happened with a lot of chestnuts in the United States, and so there's only certain areas where chestnuts that are not blight resistant will grow now. And unfortunately, like I said, dad remembers being on the playground at school, just eating chinky pins. They would all go out and eat those, and they loved them. And it was just kind of a staple, a thing you did. And when those went away in the mid 70s, and when the blight hit down here, he was very sad. He said that was a rough time. He said, man, all
Yeah.
the trees were gone. And he said, but that always having that memory is kind of what sparked him just to continue he loves gardening and loves growing things. And so he really just shifted his interest into chestnuts. And he's really the one that spearheaded everything. And so he started talking about it more and more, and bought a few trees and planted them, and they were doing great. And so that got me and my little brother interested. And then this just kind of continued to grow and grow. And so we're excited to just become hopefully more and more involved in this chestnut venture that we're in.
That's fantastic. And today, actually, the Branching Out podcast featured James Nave, who's quite an authority. And one of his quotes is, "Don't plant chestnut trees because you're going to think you're going to make a lot of money. Plant them because you love to plant things." And it sounds like your
Mhm.
dad, that's kind of what got him back into it, the love of those trees, and that's so important. Um,
Absolutely.
okay. And so now I know that you have quite a bit of education. So tell us briefly where that journey of education and where you are now.
Well, sure. Well, thank you for saying that. And I have been blessed to get education in multiple fields, and I started off my career in exercise physiology, and so I have a couple of degrees in that, a master's in kinesiology with emphasis in clinical exercise physiology, and I am the lead exercise physiologist for cardiac and vascular rehabilitation. And so I've done that for many years, and I noticed that in an area most of my patients were really struggling with, we could get them to exercise and follow the protocols for that, and to help to improve their heart health and get them back in action, back to doing things they enjoyed. But one of the biggest challenges was diet, and getting them to eat a good, healthy diet. And you know that old saying, "You are what you eat." There is
Yep.
so much truth to that, because our bodies only have what we put in it. That's how our hair, our skin, our nails, our muscles, everything is made of what we eat, for good or for bad. And so
Right.
that was the hardest thing getting across to my patients was, hey, what you do 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or however often you eat, that can make a huge difference in disease progression, mitigation, or even reversal in many instances. And so I decided to pursue another career path in nutrition and dietetics. So I got another bachelor's in food nutrition and dietetics, and then I was blessed to receive another master's in human sciences with emphasis in integrative and functional nutrition, which I love. That's my passion is nutrition, and just how it can help to heal the body.
I just love that. So I've adopted a vegan eating pattern, and I'm so excited because I just got my almond cow milk maker, and I haven't tried it yet, but I'm going to make chestnut milk. So
Oh.
we just don't know where this path is going to take us as far as the chestnut, that we're so excited about the trees and the product and health, fitness, and in diet, etc. Um, so do you provide consulting services? Because I know that Americans need help. So many Americans need help around what they eat, and also just getting up and moving. I know you kind of just wrapped up some of your education, but is consulting something you do now or might do in the future on the individual practice?
So it is something that I've planned on doing in the future, is private practice. So as a dietitian, we can do that, and have private practice with patients. Now, right now, I'm currently working with the company that I work for to bridge dietetics in with cardiac and vascular rehabilitation. So that's what we're working on doing currently. And then I also am an adjunct clinical instructor for a university down here in the nutrition department. So I've been blessed to be able to start teaching some of the things that I love and enjoy doing. And so I'm currently at Stephen F. Austin State University, and I'm teaching. This is my first semester, so I'm excited to dive in further, and maybe one day, progress that into a full-time role, maybe in the future. But yes, I would love to dive in a little bit more into counseling and one-on-one, really working with patients.
Yeah.
I also wanted to kind of bounce off of what you were saying with I'm really excited to try this chestnut milk, by the way. I'm really excited about that. But in doing some of my research, chestnuts have been such a staple for such a long time. They were the research varies. You see some research suggesting they were cultivated around 2000 BC, some a little bit, later, earlier. I've seen lots of different numbers, but it's interesting that what we know, it seems like, is that people have been eating chestnuts for a long time, and have been doing great eating them. But one thing I thought was really interesting, in the 18th century, chestnuts were a staple in bread production. The ground chestnuts actually was a huge part of bread, especially during famine when they couldn't grow a lot of the grain and other food crops. Chestnuts were kind of the go-to. They were the backup. Hey, there's chestnuts everywhere here. Let's pick these chestnuts and start making bread with chestnuts. And I think that's really neat. There's so many applications for it, and it's also gluten-free. So for those that really are struggling with sensitivities, food sensitivities, or struggling with celiac disease or other issues, maybe have gluten intolerance, which is growing a number of people in the United States. Man, this could be a great um, alternative product to produce and make bread out of, or other things. So it's just really interesting, like you said, where things are going with chestnuts.
Yes, you'll probably end up being one of the specialists in the industry. Put tying together the product and the health benefits. If the blight hadn't have come to the U.S. Long ago, we would know that it's a food staple to have in our milk products, perhaps in bread and eating in all kinds of ways. But because the product wasn't here, Americans don't know. And me personally, just that's so exciting to think that we can move the needle on such a great product from great trees. And it's going to take all of us, all the different skill sets that we have. So you've done some research on the chestnuts, from coming from your vision. Basically, what have you found out, or that you'd like to share, that might be helpful to listeners?
There's so many things that are just unique about chestnuts, and so for one thing, when you really dive into nuts, there's so many different nuts, right? And I found some really good articles in some of the references that I shared with you that really break down lots of different nuts and the nutrition profile. And when we think about nuts, a lot of times we think about, oh, heart healthy. You see that on the back of almonds. That this may help to improve or reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease or other things, and on almonds or walnuts or things like that. And so we associate nuts a lot of times with fat content, and chestnuts are very different. Most nuts have the heart healthy fats, and chestnuts do as well, but they have a much lower amount of fat than most nuts. And so they're a very low fat food item. So for individuals that are looking and trying to choose low fat items, that could be a good option for them. They do have a high carbohydrate content, which is a great for energy. It's carbohydrates are an essential fuel to help with your muscles and your body, your brain. It's a primary source of fuel for your brain for most everyone, unless you're on a ketogenic diet or something like that. And so, a very, very large amount of carbohydrates in chestnuts compared to other nuts, and low fat compared to other nuts. And another thing that kind of makes chestnuts unique is they actually have quite a bit of fiber. Most nuts have a decent amount of fiber. Chestnuts have a significant amount, so much so that they're actually considered a good source of fiber, about 5 grams per 100 grams of nuts. And if you think about 100 grams of nuts for somebody might be thinking, what in the world is that? How many nuts is 100 grams? Well, for best I could find, it's going to vary between the nut size. Some nuts are smaller or larger depending on the cultivar, depending on the species, the variety of the nut, depending on where it's grown. And so it's going to roughly be around a couple of handfuls, 2 or 3 handfuls is going to be around 100 grams. So 5 grams of fiber per that is a pretty good amount of fiber.
Yes.
Also, chestnuts have a very large amount of vitamin C. So in comparison with nuts like almonds or walnuts, pistachios, chestnuts have around 40 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams of nuts. And so the next closest thing is a peanut, and it's got about 5 to 12 milligrams per 100 grams. So roughly 4 times the amount of any other nut. That's quite a bit. And chestnuts have a very high water content. So this kind of makes sense because vitamin C is a water soluble vitamin. Most other nuts have a higher fat content, and so they're going to typically have lower amounts of vitamin C. Vitamin C is so important for so many things. It's very important in collagen formation in the body, important in wound healing. It's a very potent antioxidant, so reduces oxidative stress. And oxidative stress or inflammation is involved in almost any disease you can think of, from cancer to heart disease, diabetes, you name it. Inflammation is involved in all of those things. And so having such a high vitamin C content, again, makes this nut kind of unique and special among nuts. Another really important thing is it actually has very high amounts of B vitamins and folate. B vitamins and folate are important for so many things. One is DNA methylation, and this is kind of complex and can get deep into like nutritional biochemistry or other things. But in a short sense, DNA methylation is the attachment of certain chemical groups to DNA molecules to kind of activate them or deactivate them and help your body to respond appropriately to stress or other things going on. And so folate and B vitamins are super important with that. They're also very important with energy production within the body. And very important for women. Most women know that your doctor will tell you, make sure you're taking a prenatal vitamin if you're pregnant that has folate in it or folic acid. And so chestnuts have a very high amount when compared to most other nuts, actually the highest that I saw in the research studies that I looked at.
Yeah.
Now, I'm talking a lot about these nutrients, right, in different nuts, but I do want to caveat this by saying that nuts, the nutritional quality of nuts, just like any other fruit or vegetable, depends on lots of different things. And the three big things it depends on is one, where is it grown? The soil, the nutritional components within the soil, what minerals are in that soil. So if I grow a chestnut in Texas and there's one grown in California, then the nuts, although very similar in profile, are going to have differences based on the soil. Also, cultivar differences make a big difference. The different varieties of Chinese chestnut or American Chinese mixed chestnuts, that makes a big difference on the nutrient profile. And the third thing is the actual species or variety. So we know there's kind of the four main species, and then there's lots of cultivars off of these species, right? So European chestnuts versus Chinese chestnuts versus those that grow in Japan versus those that grow in the United States, they're all going to have some differences in the chemical components that make them up.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, those are some of the big highlights. I also wanted to point out a few things. Now, you stop me if you have any, you want to take a pause in any of this.
I just want to interject because these are all so perfect, and this subject personally interests me a great deal. But you also think not only where the nut kind of is grown in the soil, but think of how many nuts are imported from China and Italy, and all of the nutrients that are probably lost, a lot of the nutrients that are lost in that whole transportation, which is why, we're trying to see a growth in the American production of chestnuts in America, not the American chestnut. But anyway,
Absolutely.
so it's thank you for all this so far. Keep going.
Sure. Yeah, well, so another big interesting thing, and I'm really excited about this. So I could talk literally probably for days on some of this stuff. So, but another big point I wanted to highlight was just the polyphenol content of chestnuts. And so polyphenols are essentially chemical compounds found in plants in general. So any plant crop or plant that is consumed, they're going to have polyphenol compounds. The coffee that we drink every day, green tea, or other things like that, they're going to have these polyphenol compounds. And they're, like I said, chemical organic compounds that are found in plants, and they actually have very potent antioxidant properties. And so an antioxidant is something that helps to reduce inflammation in the body, just like vitamin C. But these polyphenols are very important for many, many different things. You take any one of these polyphenols that I'm going to mention that are found in chestnuts, and we could really talk on days on these because there's so much research behind each one of these and what they may be able to do for the body. So chestnuts have several different compounds. One is called gallic acid, one is called egalic acid, And these are two that you could just do a quick Google search of it, or go to Google Scholar, look up some peer-reviewed research studies, and you'll find lots of different things: reduction in risk of cancer, improvements in LDL oxidation. So, our LDL is a type of cholesterol in our body, and part of the theory behind heart disease development and progression is that LDL particle, something causes it to get kind of angry and oxidize, and it gets stuck to the walls of the artery. Over time, that can build up plaque that can cause a heart disease or a stroke or blockage in blood flow to one of the vessels of the body. Well, everyone has cholesterol. We've got to have cholesterol. It's super important for our body. But LDL is kind of the cholesterol that, if there is inflammation present in the body, and how do we get inflammation in the body? Well, the foods we eat can contribute to inflammation. Like we were talking about earlier, what we eat, for good or for bad, can drastically impact our body. So the foods we eat, if we eat a lot of really processed fried foods, different things, over time, this can cause some low-grade inflammation in our bodies, what a lot of research has suggested. Do we have high blood pressure? Are we a smoker? Do we have any of these other risk factors that can cause potentially some low-grade inflammation in the vessels of our body? This can cause that LDL to become oxidized and stuck to the walls of the artery. Well, some of these polyphenols found in chestnuts, they can actually help to mitigate this, decrease the risk of that happening, and maybe even prevent it altogether if we have enough of this and we're getting frequent consumption of fruits and vegetables in our body. And so that's why there's such good research behind, vegan diet or plant-based diet. If a patient or individual doesn't want to go vegan, just eating more plants. There's tons of benefits behind that. And so chestnuts are just a super food when it comes to this. Actually, when compared to other nuts, one of the research studies that I looked at 11 different types of nuts, and they found that chestnuts actually had the highest polyphenol content out of any of those other nuts. And now, these were European chestnuts, and so again, from different cultivars. So there's going to be some differences between nuts with cultivars and where they're all grown, and so just kind of keep that in mind. But how amazing is that? I mean, how awesome is it to hear that chestnuts have such a high amount of these antioxidants?
Yeah, wait until that marketing message is packaged correctly and we have the proper amount of chestnuts available, easily tapped into by the consumer. It's why, I talk a lot with the grower community and the research on the trees themselves, but from a sales perspective of this crop, it's just it's really wide open. And especially when we start layering on what you're talking about, and then we have our chefs talking about it, and we have sustainability and circularity and corporate gift giving and all these kind of things. It's exciting for those who are in the grower community, which is both of us, along with a lot of other folks. So yeah, I just love it. What else do you know?
Well, I wanted to talk a minute about the flavor of a chestnut. So some people watching, I'm assuming most people watching this probably have tasted and had many, many chestnuts, but maybe not. Maybe somebody's watching this that hasn't. And I really enjoy the taste of chestnuts and the flavor. And to me, they taste, again, depends on how they're prepared. And we've been blessed, me and dad and my little brother and mom and my wife, we've been kind of experimenting with different ways of preparing and cooking chestnuts. And we made a chestnut risotto a while back, and it was very delicious. I love risotto anyways, and then you throw in some good chestnuts in there, and it's great. But just roasting them, the sweetness of a chestnut, it's kind of got a sweet potato like flavor to me. But it's a little bit sweeter, especially when they're roasted. And if you don't put anything on them, they're just a sweeter version of a sweet potato. It's just a really, really great flavor. What about you, Melanie? What do you think chestnuts kind of taste like when?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. I mean, I've been using them a lot in dishes, and so
Mhm.
I think feel like they kind of take on the flavor of some of the other
Mhm.
ingredients that they're prepared with. And so I was mentioning James Naves was a guest today on the podcast, and he talked a little bit about that how important
Mhm.
how we cook chestnuts, and has a
Mhm.
lot more experience than I do, or maybe than you do with that.
Mhm.
And I had the analogy that I had a salad a couple weeks ago, and I ordered tofu on it, and it was just tofu that someone had slung on a grill for a minute, and it
Oh,
was horrible because you've got to understand how to prepare things. So that's part of the mission too, I think, is with the US consumer, is we have to have creative ways to say, buy this product and here's how you can cook it, because it's not like a pecan or some other ingredients that we're very familiar with. So yeah, I have more experimenting to do, and we keep selling out, and I haven't set aside enough to really properly, play with.
Mhm. No, very true. I'm very inexperienced with cooking of chestnuts. We just kind of breached the surface and have taken a dive into experimenting with different flavors. And like you said, it's so unique because they have their own unique flavor that's very good, but when you pair them, they pair so well, and they're so hearty too that when you do eat them, I mean, you feel full. Like it's like, man, this is a
Yes.
good component to a meal. It actually helps, and you're getting tons of good vitamins and minerals as well. So,
Yeah, that's right. It's a win-win, and it's kind of fun. I know I travel for my job a lot, and everywhere I go, I ask people, like, I tell the story about the chestnut industry, and have you had them? And most of the time, nah, I know the song. That's all they know. And so we really have to change that. This is a universe of people to open the door to this great, healthy, healthful product. Um,
absolutely.
any more tidbits from your vast research there?
Yeah. So a couple of others, if we want to dive
Okay.
even further.
Yeah.
So the chestnuts actually have a good amount of potassium, and most nuts do. Most nuts have a good amount of potassium. Chestnuts are right along with the rest of them. And so daily intake of potassium want to be somewhere around 4.7 grams. And so we're looking at about a half a gram per 100 grams of chestnuts, which is pretty good. Around
Mhm.
400, 500, again, depending on where the chestnuts are grown. But potassium is so important. It's actually very important for regulating blood pressure and to improve blood pressure. We hear a lot, hey, watch the sodium, watch your salt intake. That can help to reduce blood pressure. But oftentimes we're not told that the ratio of potassium to sodium can make just as much difference. And in some people, maybe even more difference if we're eating very high potassium foods, which most plants are. We want to be getting quite a bit of potassium. Now, there are some caveats if we have renal disease or other things. You certainly want to make sure that your doctor's aware of what you're eating, and you certainly want to do that. But they are a good source of potassium, a good source of magnesium, as most nuts are. So they fit right along in there with magnesium and potassium. They have a decent amount of calcium, which most people don't think about plants having calcium. They think, oh, that's milk and that's dairy products, which is true. That dairy products have a good amount of calcium, but nuts actually have quite a bit of calcium. And chestnuts have a good amount of calcium as well. And so for a mineral profile, chestnuts are great. They have lots of copper as well, which is so important. Copper, magnesium. These are some minerals that many Americans don't get enough of, especially magnesium. And it's
Yes.
involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. And so that's a lot. That's a lot. And that's just what we know of right now. And so the potential for magnesium to help is amazing. And chestnuts have a decent amount in there. They have a good amount.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That
mhm.
that's fantastic. Um, have you seen the Blue Zones? Have you read or seen that series on Netflix?
So I haven't seen the series, but I've discussed a lot about that, read research on that, and looked at several different things with that. There's lots of good
Yeah.
research behind it.
Yes, and I just think it's an interesting thing for anyone that's listening to this, is kind of thinking more about health and what we
Mhm.
eat and how it affects our body. But yeah, along with that discussion is a lot of mentions and recipes of chestnuts, because it's cultures that are outside of America. Well, there's Loma Linda, California, but anyway, I just wanted to see if you had heard about that. Okay, so wow, you're giving us a lot to think about. I think in short, it is eat chestnuts. um, so any last important thoughts? We can keep this to about a half hour, but um, anything else to share on the front of the nutritional value?
Well, let's see. I think I've mentioned most things. I did want to talk briefly about chestnut storage, and most people that are watching this, they probably have a good idea. And we're learning. We're learning. I'm learning things daily on this. But I did want to mention, just as far as foods in general, that there's several things that will cause food to spoil, and chestnuts do have a high water content. So just some things to be aware of. And you let me know if y'all have different methods. I know that me and Dad, when Dad goes and picks them, and I live about an hour, a little over an hour away from my dad, and so
Okay.
I try to get there as often as we can, and help out as often as we can. And our goal is to eventually move closer, and be there and really be a lot more involved in the future. So, but chestnuts do have a high water content. And there's several different things that can cause food to spoil. Water, uh, time and temperature. So how long they're out, how long that food is out, what temperature it's at, and water content, the acid content of that food. So many different things that can cause food to spoil. And from the research that I read and my dad has read, one of the best things when you are going to get chestnuts is to have them as fresh as possible. Would be to pick them, of course, as soon as they fall, or pick them or get them from the ground as soon as they fall. If that was ideal, we could, as soon as we see them, oh, there we go, grab it, and then go put it in the refrigerator if you don't plan on eating it right away. That's one good way to keep that chestnut good and fresh, to prevent mold and spoilage, because chestnuts are unlike a lot of the other nuts where we can just pick them and set them aside. They do have a lot of water content, so there is a much higher risk of spoilage. And so just want to kind of keep that in mind. And flavor. So here's something that's interesting about chestnut flavor too. I don't know if you've ever had potatoes and you put them in storage for a while, and if you have like a vegetable cellar or something where you keep them and you pull them out, and let's say they're older potatoes, they often taste sweeter than fresh potatoes. And the same thing with chestnuts. Most of the research that I've taken a dive into from the nutrition quality also talks about flavor profile, and how chestnuts actually get sweeter with longer storage sometimes. And so we just want to make sure that storage is good and appropriate, so they're not all spoiled, so making sure that time and temperature is maintained well, with those. But actually what happens is a lot of the starch in some of these starchy vegetables, nuts, and fruits is like potatoes, is that starch is slowly converted into sugar. And so chestnuts have a very large portion of the carbohydrate content is in starch, is locked up in the starch. And so what'll happen is that starch begins to degrade and turns into glucose. Well, glucose is a sweet tasting sugar. And so that may be, if you really want something very sweet at Christmas time and you have some older chestnuts that have been kept good and fresh, that may be a good time to break those out and have a really good sweet treat, especially if they've been in storage a little longer. They may actually taste a little sweeter. So that's just a fun fact that may help. And maybe experiment with this, and we're going to try to experiment with this and see if we can really tell a big difference in the flavor profile. A lot of the research suggests that you can, and it actually does make them quite a bit sweeter. I also wanted to briefly mention some about just labeling. So I don't know how many. And again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not. Definitely be best when you're going to label anything to speak to your lawyer or a law professional that can help to guide you in these things. But I did want, for those that may not be aware that are starting up, most nutrition label regulations are under the FDA, and there's three big claims that the FDA kind of allows to happen. So we have nutrition content claims. So this chestnut has X amount of vitamin C, or a good source of vitamin C. There's regulations. You can't just say it's a good source of something and put it on a label, because there's actually a stipulation. It has to have 10 to 20% of that vitamin or mineral to say it's a good source. Now, a lot of people have gotten in trouble not meaning to. I mean, trying to do the honest thing, say, hey, I know that there's some vitamin C in here, so I'm going to put good source of vitamin C on here. Well, if this gets back or somebody finds out, and eventually you may be in trouble and have to pay a fine or other things. And so we want to avoid that. So you definitely want to make sure you do talk to your lawyer or someone to help to mitigate what labeling that you do on packages, if you plan on selling these online or at stores or different things. And for right now, Texas chestnuts, with me, my dad, and my brother, we're planning on having a U-pick where we have individuals that come and pick. We may do some other types of selling in the future, but I just want to be aware of that. So there's health claims. There are nutrient claims, like I mentioned. Health claims are like, hey, this has been shown to help with this disease. And we can't say that right off the bat unless the FDA has already said, hey, calcium can help to improve or reduce the risk of osteoporosis. So if this item has a lot of calcium, we can say that claim with approval from the FDA. And then another one is structure function claims, and this is what you see on the back of almonds or other nuts. And so this would be maybe a quicker option for those that are wanting to put labeling on their package. You see on the back of almonds when you turn it over, we kind of talked about this earlier, that they say these almonds may be associated with reduced risk of heart disease or other things. A diet with plenty of these nuts can maybe help. But at the bottom, you'll notice it says this statement has not been evaluated by the FDA, and there's lots of other text below that. So that's a disclaimer that has to be put if you do put that label on there. There's other requirements and stipulations, but I just wanted everyone to kind of be aware of that. There is some requirements, but I think labeling is a great thing. There's so many good things that can be said about chestnuts, and to be able to put some of these on a label eventually, I think once we go through all the legal hoops, it is great and amazing. And then we have so much to build upon here with labeling and marketing with chestnuts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I know we've purchased plenty of chestnuts and there are no labels, but if you think about trying to expand into Amazon and different things like that, where you do want to put some information, that's really important to know. And so I appreciate you having researched that, and something we need to kind of keep in mind. Last question for you is, I know you're a busy guy between all the education and your job and your wife, and you've got some kids, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah, so I have 3 beautiful girls with my wife, and then my two daughters, and Landry, that she's my oldest daughter. She's 5 years old, and she loves to plant. We have planted so many different things in our backyard, and with my dad, and she calls him Poppy. So with her Poppy, and so we go out there and we plant, and she loves being outside. And then my youngest daughter, her name is Lila, and she's almost 2 years old. She'll be 2 in April, and she is the same way. She would rather be outside than anywhere else. And I took her outside the other morning. It was very cold here. It was around 30, and we went outside, and I thought, well, she's not going to last very long. It's pretty cold, and she just wanted to be outside and play. And they both love planting and gardening and just being outside. And so that's been a big blessing. And so I certainly want this to continue on with them. And they love being with their Poppy, on the chestnut orchard.
That makes me so happy, it's just important in this computer, AI driven world that we're living in, that we get our kids outside and remember what it's like to plant and get our hands dirty and everything. So well, fantastic. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I sure appreciate your time and expertise, and you may be back on another episode with your offering consulting, which I know a lot of people should be interested in tapping into.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Like I said, it's been a blessing, and I'm so excited for this podcast. I'm excited to tune in and learn more and more about chestnuts.
That sounds great. Thanks, Landon, so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Branching Out, hosted by United Chestnuts. For information about chestnut trees and chestnuts, visit unitedchestnuts.com. Subscribe to the weekly blog and join the United Chestnuts community Facebook group. Let's grow together.